Welcome to the Dental Brief, the world's direct, right-to-the-point podcast produced to get you the information you need to learn and grow your practice. To learn more about our guests and find links to information discussed on our show, visit our website, dentalbrief.com. On to today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dental Brief. I have with us today our guest, Mr. Brian Hanks. Mr. Hanks, say hello.
Hi, Patrick.
Glad to have you here. Now, you're located in Salt Lake City, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and you're an expert on dental transitions and helping dentists find practices, correct?
Yeah, so my niche is helping buyers of dental practices anywhere in the country. So I joke with dentists, it's dentists only buyers in all 50 states.
Yeah, so that only buyers really creates an awesome niche. And we're going to jump into that a little bit. But first, let's back up a little bit and tell us how you got into helping dentists find practices to buy.
Yeah, I was a dental CPA, very traditional CPA / dental financial advisor. I worked at a big, multi-thousand dental CPA firm down in Dallas. Worked for another dental CPA firm in Oregon, and I got assigned all the junior dentists. And so I got a lot of the junior dentists who were associates looking to buy their practices or in the process of buying their practices, and they would all ask me the same questions. And the questions are predictable, but they're good, right? Is this a good practice that I'm looking at? If it is a good practice, how much should I pay? Is the broker asking a fair amount? The seller wants this, that, or the other. Should I do it? And then their third question was always, hey, how much money am I going to make? And Patrick, I'm a lazy guy. So rather than answering the same question over and over, I would just write a blog post and I would send them the blog post when I got the question, same question, right? And after time, I noticed I had like 30, 40 blog posts and thought, I could probably turn this into a book. It seems like it would help people. And so I did. And being an accountant, I'm obviously, like the opposite of creative. So I titled the book, How to Buy a Dental Practice. And I got such a good response that I've turned this into a business, and it's been fun, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, and I want to jump into the book and talk about an offer that you have for our listeners. But first, I want to talk a little bit about your background as being a CPA. So CPAs, in my experience, are very data-driven, non-emotional, and they see a lot of things in black and white. Would you agree with that? That
tends to be true, yes.
Yeah, but when buying a practice or selling a practice, it's not as that black and white. It becomes very emotional, correct?
Oh, man, yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good fit, and I think I think our audience is going to love to hear what you have to say. I know one of the challenges that we talked a little bit before we started today was dentists knowing if it's the right time or when the right time is, if they should or they shouldn't buy a practice. So is that is something that you see quite often, right? That's a common question and one that you've blogged about, yes?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. Before COVID and you could travel, I went out to my alma mater, University of Michigan, go Blue, and I was in one of those auditorium style seating classrooms with probably 200 plus D3s, D4s, some specialists in the room. We were talking about how to buy a dental practice. And I asked the room, hey, how many of you guys want to buy your own practice after you finish your education? And Patrick, it was really interesting. It was like 10 to 15% of the hands went up. I found that fascinating because the data show that it's at least 70 to somewhere in the 85% range of all dentists will at least have some ownership percentage in their career. So I asked the room, I'm like, what's the story, right? You've got these future doctors, right? Data-driven individuals, right? You joked about CPAs being data-driven. Holy cow, doctors, they got all kinds of data they're looking at. And the answers I got back all had the word feel in them, right? It was, Brian, I don't feel ready. I feel like my student loan balances are too high. I feel nervous about where I'm at in my career or where I'm going to move to. And then as I've gone through and kind of done a lot of these dental transitions, I hear a lot of the same things from owners and future sellers. They're saying, gosh, I feel like dentistry is changing. DSOs, I feel like they're taking over. I feel like dentists have too high a student loan balance to buy my practice. How is this all going to work? And so, yeah, you've got these data-driven people like me and dentists, and then you have a lot of these feel conversations, and it's creating a big problem in the industry. I'll talk about how you might be able to solve that, but just to validate what you're saying, a lot of the discussions are around the feel word.
Sure. And I know that, I think we all know that feelings can sometimes play tricks on you, right? Or often plays tricks on you, and they're not actually valid. And then other times they're very valid. So how does someone know if it's the right time? How do they know if it's an emotional feeling that's not based on actual logic and facts? How do they sort their way through this? How do you help young dentists decide when they should feel right?
I never want to invalidate someone's feelings. Your feelings are there for a reason. They're oftentimes stopping you from making horrible decisions or mistakes. In this case, let's take the decision of whether or not to buy a practice and how soon to do it. I would say dentists' feelings in general, and this isn't for everybody, but I'd say 80 to 90% of dentists out there, they are ready sooner than they feel like they are. And the counterintuitive point that a lot of dentists don't get here are the numbers, right? And the numbers show that owners make a lot more money than associates, right? So if you are a cash-strapped, just out of dental school associate with $300,000, $400,000, $600,000 in student loans, and you feel that mountain of crushing debt and that monthly payment going out, and you're wondering, gosh, what do I do? I sure hope President Biden forgives all these loans. Never going to happen, by the way. The natural inclination is, let me feel like I can get these student loans taken care of, and then maybe I'll think about buying a practice. And I'm here to tell you that the numbers show the fastest way to pay off those student loans is to go make a lot of money. And the fastest way to make money in dentistry is to own your own practice. And the banks, by the way, who don't deal in feelings, right? They're running the numbers. They're cold, hard facts. And the banks will loan to dentists with high student loan balances at about a year after they finish their education, with some wiggle room on military docs and specialists and AEGDs and GPRs and things like that. So the numbers clearly show that the way to get past that feeling of nerves, if you're a potential buyer or sellers talking to potential buyers, is probably going to be sooner than you feel like it's going to be, that you're ready.
Yeah. And Brian, I know a lot of bankers that work specifically in medical, healthcare, dental, helping with acquisitions and helping with startups and all of that. And unfortunately, they really can't come on the show because of, securities reasons and what have you, which makes sense. So oftentimes it's people like you that we can get some pretty good information from in regards to banking. Now, as I understand it, and I'm sure you know the number, the default rate on dental practice loans is like the lowest default rate there is in banking, period, right? And do you know what the number is off the top of your head?
I do. Yeah, the number I've heard from the largest dental lender in the country is a 0.49%. And let me put that in comparison. So here's the way they phrase it to me. Mortgage default rates are 1.8. Credit card default rates are somewhere like 2.7 to 2.8. So 0.49, or let's just round to 0.5, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 33% of the normal mortgage default rate. In other words, a banker at a conference put it to me this way. He said, Brian, the only dentists who can't make their practice loan payments are the ones who go through a super messy divorce or get addicted to drugs or end up in jail.
Right.
That's it.
Right. So, or all three, right? The trifecta.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The divorce leads to drugs, which leads to jail. So basically, and tell me if this is wrong for me to think or to say, if a bank is willing to loan you money financially, you're ready. Is that financially?
Exactly. Financially, you're ready. Now you have to decide mentally, how am I going to be as a boss? Do I want to have the responsibility of ownership? And that's a separate question, but the numbers side, you're ready. And here's what I'd tell you is, if you're worried about the business side, like mentally, can I be the person in charge? Guess what? Unless you're in a multi-doc office, 20 something ops, and there's 5 doctors running around, you're probably going to be in charge anyway, right? Maybe you're not making the payroll decision, but the day-to-day, Susie assistant can't show up. This person got pregnant. This person needs to change the schedule. This, hygienist didn't do this check right. As the doctor, you're doing 90% of the managing of a business anyway, whether if you're chair side. So you're probably already doing most of the business stuff as it is.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Now, go ahead and let's jump into actionable steps. Right, we want our audience today to what are some steps that they can take today to start to find out if they're ready to start to sort out feelings, what have you. So, give me 2-3 steps that you think a young dentist can take today.
So the first thing is to, if you're a young dentist, create relationships with sellers. Sellers start to create relationships with potential buyers. All right. Patrick, you and I know some of the same brokers in the industry. Brokers are awesome. They do a great job. There's some that don't earn their fee. So brokers, if buyers and sellers can kind of get together, brokers, may not be necessary, or if they are, you can get it for cheaper because you've done a lot of the hard work. So that's concrete step number one. I'll give you one more concrete step, and that is, as a buyer, know the 5 numbers you need or the 5 things you need to be ready to buy a practice. And sellers, potential sellers, be listening for these 5, because a buyer is going to need to have them to buy your practice. All right. So Patrick, I'll start with the easiest, and then I'll end with the hardest of the 5. The easiest is you got to have a credit score over 680. It's a go, no go. All right. 681 isn't going to get you a better rate with most banks than an 800 score. Clean credit history is almost a no-brainer, slightly different than credit score, right? But you can't have any bankruptcies or short sales in your background. All right.
Okay.
You got to have about a year's worth of experience as a general rule. There are exceptions, but they're rare. And as a dentist, you don't want to be a D4 probably buying a practice, trying to figure out clinically how to do the 6th crown you've ever done while also trying to run a practice. So go work for about a year, but after a year, you're ready. All right. Fourth thing, second hardest thing you're going to need is you're going to need to do about 80% of the production of the seller you're buying from, whether you're buying into a partnership or you're buying out a retiring doctor. Nobody's expecting you to be as fast as a 60-year-old doctor who's been doing pain-free injections and pulling teeth for 30 plus years, but you got to be able to do about 80% of what the last guy was doing so that you can make that loan payment. All right. Okay. And the fifth and the hardest thing for most people is you got to have cash. You got to have, and the general rule is the lesser of 10% of the purchase price or $50,000. And the trick is you're not going to physically hand that cash over to the bank like you would a down payment on a house, but you do have to have that account liquid in a bank account that you can show the bank at the time of closing.
Let me interrupt you there for just a second. I'm a big believer in paying off debt fast, right? So if you have a student loan and it's $500,000, the faster you pay that off, the less that's going to cost you, right? So, and it may not always be the right thing, but in this situation, if you paid off $50,000 of your student loan early, it could actually prevent you from buying a practice right away because you don't have that money in reserves.
Exactly. Bank is going to pat you on the head. They're going to say, doctor, really nice job paying off that $50,000 in cash. You can't buy a practice right now. Come back to us when you've got some cash.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yep.
5 steps. So what I want to do at this time is, talk a little bit about your book. I know that you offer it and we appreciate it. And I think our staff will too. Free copy of your book. You can find it on your website. Yeah. Your website's brianhanks.com. The website is How to Buy a Dental Practice. Great place to start, right? Absolutely. Yeah. Great place to start. Tell us a little bit about the book and what value that's going to bring our audience.
So it's 9 chapters, just under 200 pages. It's going to walk you through the entire process of finding a practice, analyzing a practice, negotiating with a seller or broker, what to do about the real estate, and some of the very first things you're going to do as an owner. So it really is an attempt to demystify this whole buying a practice process. And yeah, if you go to howtobuyaddentalpractice.com, no spaces, no capitals, you can get a free copy. Just pay for printing and shipping, and we'll get that right out. What I do is I put in an author order with the publisher. Happy to mail that out to you.
Appreciate that very much. And again, that's at brianhanks.com. And I know we're running a little over, and I think it's worth it. Last thing I want you to do is, you mentioned there's a lot of great brokers out there. There's brokers that don't own their fee, et cetera. Tell me, how does someone go about vetting? In 1 minute or less, how would you tell our audience to vet someone to work with to help them?
Okay, so if you are thinking about selling your practice, I've got 2 tips for you. Do both of these things, and you're guaranteed to find a really good broker. All right. Thing number 1 is ask a broker you're thinking about hiring for an example listing document. All right, this is the PDF that they're going to send out to all the buyers of your practice. Just ask a broker, hey, send me the last one you sent to a buyer. Take a look at it, and then put yourselves in the shoe of a buyer. If you looked at that document, would you want to buy that practice? And I will tell you, 8 out of 10 times, the brokers are sending out total garbage. All right, 2 out of 10, they're awesome. That's the broker you want. Okay.
I've
the other
seen
thing
it.
to do, don't talk to the former sellers about how that broker did. Find out who bought from that seller and call the buyer. The buyer is going to tell you very clearly how good of a job the broker did, and they will be they'll be ruthless in their feedback, and sometimes very complimentary. Brokers, the good brokers, they earn their fee 2 times over, and the buyers have nothing but praise for them.
So that's two questions for a seller to ask. What are 2 questions for a buyer to ask?
So for a buyer, do you have a listing I'm interested in? Right?
Sure.
Do you have a practice for sale in the geography that I want, in the price range I'm looking for, that has the general characteristics that I'm looking for? In most cases, buyers can suffer through a bad broker. There are a few exceptions. If you want to know who those are, I will not tell you over the air, over a podcast. You can get me in person sometime, buy me lunch. I'll give you the names. But anyway, yeah, mostly for buyers, what I tell buyers is spend 20% of your time networking with brokers looking for a practice, but spend the other 80% of your time networking directly with doctors with some gray hair that may think that they're ready to sell a practice or know someone who may sell their practice. That's going to be where you find the off-market, really good practices for sale that you're going to want to buy.
That's great advice. Brian, really appreciate you being here today. Folks, check out the website, brianhanks.com. Check out the book, free with shipping for our listeners. We really appreciate that. Brian, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Did you know you can weigh in on today's topic on Facebook? Search The Dental Brief on Facebook or visit our website, dentalbrief.com, and just follow the link. We look forward to having you join us again on another episode of The Dental Brief.